Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was created in the Off My Chest subreddit by a user named Equivalent Ladder 197. The post is titled, "My brother proposed to my fiance, his ex, and I'm pissed. My 28M brother Mark, 26M, used to date my fiance, Jen, 26F, a year ago. For context, they dated back in August 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke things off with her because he was bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating, I was in a different state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend, and I had no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back in October and hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met, and we met up a few times more before we made it official. Fast forward to December, and I finally brought her up to my family and proposed them meeting her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not the most open about my personal life, so I kept details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we really were. My parents asked to see pictures and they started passing my phone around the dinner table. Mark saw it and blew up, calling me a shit brother for dating his ex-girlfriend, and he demanded I break it off with her. I refused. When I asked Jen about it, she confirmed they dated and gave me the details about their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped bringing up me dating his ex, and I thought he was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends, and I asked her to marry me. Mark flipped once again and blew up about me proposing to her, which I and my sisters immediately shut down. The incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about the whole thing for the last 2 months. I didn't see him much and figured he went low contact with me, which I had no problem with. Then he invited me and Jen for family dinner at his apartment with my parents and sisters. I thought it was weird, but my parents and sisters were also going, so we agreed to go. The dinner was nice, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes into normal conversation, Mark stood up and told us he had an announcement. He made a long speech about being happy to have his family around for his big moment, then got on one knee and pulled out this cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable and demanded that he put it away and stand up. My dad tried to make a grab for Mark, but I got to him first and punched him. I won't repeat most of it, mostly because I was too angry to even listen to most of it, but he said something along the lines of wanting to show me that Jen wasn't really into me and just wanted to get back at him. Before it could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened and I'm still pissed off. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts about marrying me because of this. Any advice? Edit. First, thanks for reading and responding. I've been reading the comments between last night and this morning and valid points were made. There isn't an update since the only people I've spoken to since that dinner are Jen and my little sister. I want to clarify a few things that I saw in the comments. Jen and I are newly engaged. It was one of those feelings where we both knew we were in it for the long run. As fast as it is, I'm sure about her. When we met, I was the one who approached her, not the other way around. Whether she knew or had suspicions of us being related, I don't know. I asked after finding out they dated and she says she had no idea. I didn't have a reason to doubt that, but I can admit this seemingly overreaction on Mark's part does raise red flags. I had no idea she and Mark dated when I met her. Mark and I aren't close at all. We used to be, but as we grew up, we drifted and talked less and less. Before I moved back, we didn't really speak much aside from special days like his or my birthday. Jen knew of my family, but not much until I decided I was ready to introduce them to her. When she and Mark met again, I didn't get a sense of any residual feelings on either part. She didn't treat him like a stranger, but she also wasn't overly affectionate with him either. I was told this was a relationship that lasted a month. I didn't think I needed permission from Mark to ask her to marry me, but maybe that was wrong of me. I'm not sure. That being said, I plan to talk to Mark this weekend to lay everything out on the table and figure out what's up. I never asked for his side of their relationship, which is my fault for not doing my due diligence. If anything major or enlightening happens, I'll update, but for now, that's all I have. User Rosen Waver said, I think it's clear that your brother doesn't even like or want Jen. He doesn't even see her as human. He sees her as an object, a toy that he didn't want, but seeing someone else with it makes him go, no, mine, like a child. So he's acting out and trying to drive a wedge between you all in order to get his way. If he liked her, he would care about how she feels. If he liked her, he'd want her to be happy. He doesn't like her, so forget the tantrum he's trying to pull and block him. There's no need to entertain that shit. User Lone Wolf said, block your brother out of your life for good. That's the only way you and your fiance will be able to live peacefully. Don't listen to the he's family BS if anyone tries to give it to you. User Dazed and Confused said, no advice from me, but I really hope you got a good shot in. I can't imagine the narcissism in his brain to think she must be obsessed with him and that she couldn't possibly have fallen in love with another man. Sure, it's awkward for the initial realization, for her that you guys are brothers and for you guys that you're dating his ex, but you're adults and nobody knew prior to your relationship beginning. Best of luck with the whole ordeal. User Illustrator Slow 1614 said, I think you and Jen are moving ridiculously quickly, even aside from the whole she's your brother's ex thing. You got engaged after knowing her less than a year. You still haven't even spent an entire year with her yet. What's the rush? Why are you trying to lock her down before you really know her? And why is she agreeing to this instead of seeing the red flags? You both need to slow down. User Lava Lampion said, a woman who wants to marry you isn't going to back away from it over a crazy brother she probably doesn't like much anyway, and with whom you'll probably go NC or LC anyway. Only your own actions can do that. So handle it as an adult and don't engage your infantile brother at his level. Apologize to her and set up a nice date to wash off the stench. About 3 days later, OP provided us with an update. First, I want to thank everyone for reading. It's been a busy weekend, so I haven't had the chance to reply to many people, but I did edit in responses to the most common questions I saw in the comments of the original post. Again, thank you. I appreciate it all, even the criticisms. Now for the update, I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be around for the talk as well, but I was cool with it if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my place around noon today. It was pretty quiet for a few minutes before I started the conversation. I apologized for not warning him I would be proposing to Jen, and I apologized for hitting him. He said it was whatever, but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was true. I pretty much said that his reaction throughout this whole thing has been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding their relationship or downplaying how serious they were. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks, and he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked if he was acting like this because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there weren't any feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl he dated, even if it was short term, with his older brother, and as a man, I shouldn't have violated him by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they dated, so it wasn't like I consciously did this knowing their history together. He shrugged me off and said it didn't matter. I still should have broken it off. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same thing, which I doubt. I asked him why he proposed to her if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, to sum it up, he was talking about it to one of his buddies who was around when Mark and Jen dated, and the guy put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were related and was doing this to get back at him, considering Jen had been hung up on him after they ended. He and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it and see if they were right, so he came up with the idea to propose and see if she dumped me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him following the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go to, so it was a valid assumption. Then for her to pop up randomly with his brother affirmed his suspicions. Jen told him she'd only asked about him once following the breakup, and she'd been hanging out at those places with friends before they started dating, and she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended at the idea that she would go as low as to pursue me, just to get back at him. He shrugged and gave her a half-assed apology, but said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really didn't know, and she told him that she didn't see the resemblance in us until we were in the same room and we acted nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind, and he said okay. That pretty much wrapped up the conversation. He did tell me before he left that I could take back his invite to the wedding because he can't bring himself to support our relationship, knowing he used to date her. I told him he didn't have to worry about that as he was most likely going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our talk and I do feel better. My parents aren't too happy about him being uninvited, but they understood that it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason for being an asshole and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. As of now, I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll reach out to me anytime soon either. Once again, I want to thank everyone for reading and commenting, and if anything significant happens, I'll update again. User Fluffy Vacation 1332 said, I can't get over the fact that he only dated her for a few weeks, doesn't tell you at all, and then still expects you to break up with someone that he apparently was not interested in at all. He has some shitty friends. The fact that he doubled down tells me he's looking at your wife more as property or used goods rather than a human being. Not to mention the disrespect on a personal level to assume that you're not deserving of happiness if he's already been with that person. He has a really shitty mindset. That's likely going to paint a very bad picture of him in the future. Under this comment, another user said, for sure, a long-term friend of mine called Q dated a girl called K in the past. They dated for a few months. The whole thing ended after Q did K dirty just one too many times. I lived in a different city at the time, so it was whatever. When I moved back, I got in touch with K because I quite liked her as a person. We became friends even though I met her through Q, and he knew about it because I never hid it from him. K and I hung out a lot over time. Since our friend group was pretty tight, Q and K would hang out in a group setting every now and then. One day we went on holiday together. K was in a relationship at the time and Q wasn't. I knew Q was the type who would try to get with K because that's just the type of guy he is. He approached K relentlessly. He got shut down every single time. I didn't want to get involved, but K pulled me aside later and said she was annoyed with Q's constant insistence. So I told Q to drop it. K was in a relationship and over him. He didn't care and kept trying. A few years later, Q accused me of sleeping with K behind his back when I initially moved back, even going so far as saying I told him not to pursue K at the holidays because I was in love with her and didn't want any competition. The truth is I could have slept with K, but I didn't because I respected Q as a friend and would never knowingly date someone he did before talking it over. I also liked K and didn't want to ruin our friendship if it ever went wrong. Ultimately, I'm happy with my decision. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. No matter how well and how long some people know you, once they get a shitty idea in their heads, they'll believe it until they die, no matter what you do to prove them otherwise. OP, your fiance's attitude throughout this whole ordeal has been commendable. I hope you'll be very happy together, and I'm glad your brother decided of his own volition not to attend your wedding. User Rosie Daisy Dandy said, your brother's ego is enormous. Sounds like he doesn't believe your fiance wasn't hung up on him after the breakup. Makes sense that his friends are the same way. You're better off uninviting him and possibly taking a break from him altogether. Chances are, in his brain, it'll all be because of Jen's lingering feelings. The next update came about 1 month later. I couldn't post this to the same forum, so I'm posting this directly to my profile in case anyone is interested in an update. It's been a while since I've posted, but a few things have happened since my last talk with Mark, so I've been low contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him and he hasn't called me, and our only interactions have been in family settings. As it stands, my mom is now upset that Mark is still uninvited from my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's 22F birthday. Her boyfriend of 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something along the lines of, Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right? I laughed it off and told her I can't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and said I was being unreasonable to go through with banning him from the wedding since he's family. She accused me of holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that he and I agreed on him not coming. I then told her that this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding since the day was about Sophie, and if Mark or she want to talk about my wedding, they can call me another time. Sophie laid into my mom a bit about trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mom dropped the issue. For those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to discuss my wedding. She asked me why I was so adamant about Mark not coming to my wedding. She said that I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's previous relationship and that uninviting him was a step too far. I told her that Mark and I mutually agreed on him not coming to the wedding and he can come to me about it himself if he has a problem with it. We got into an argument and she said that if I wasn't going to reinvite Mark, then she would not be coming either because I'm ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's what she wants, then she can toss her invite in the trash because I won't beg her to be there. She asked me if I would really be okay with her not attending, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she missed an event of mine because of Mark. She said I was being an AH for throwing her past mistakes in her face, and she stormed out. I then started getting messages and phone calls from her and a few family members about the whole situation, saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark just to keep the peace. Jen's also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and get me to change my mind, but to my knowledge, she hasn't been responding. So far, most of my mom's side of the family are standing in solidarity with her and not attending, while my dad and his side of the family, which is only my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, agree with me and are still coming. My sisters are also still coming to the wedding, and of course Jen's family too. Also, I talked to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invite. He said he uninvited himself in the first place and he doesn't get why they're making a big deal because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and he says he'd tell her the same. As of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on decent terms. I'm still deciding on whether I'll reinvite my mom and her family, should they change their mind about the boycott, but the chances are low, and I told my dad this too, which he understands. For now, Jen and I started looking into downsizing the venue since the guest list is significantly smaller. Update 3, my mom is uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided to not come to the wedding, she stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food and I asked her if she was still planning on not coming to the wedding. She said that while she wants to, she can't get over me not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiance with me sitting less than 3 feet away from him, and she said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk if she was maintaining the same stance on Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen and she was hoping Jen would hear her out and talk me into inviting Mark again. She apparently assumed I was at work and she'd be able to catch her alone. Jen politely told her that she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation anyway without me present since this is about my brother. My mom made a comment somewhere along the lines of Jen being spineless and unable to have a conversation without me thinking for her, which started a pretty heated back and forth between the 3 of us before Jen told her to get out. She got up and started walking towards the door, and my mom followed her, still screaming at her. By this point, she's yelling about her tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and pulled her to the ground, still screaming. She hit her and tried to claw her face, and I dragged her off of her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called the both of us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again because we'll never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was surprised and tried to make excuses, saying she'd been stressed about this whole situation for a while. My sisters say they knew she'd snap eventually since she's always been crazy, and they said they'd come make sure Jen is okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she only wanted to cut contact with her for good. I told her that part was obvious, but she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted, but she doesn't want my mom to get arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her, thankfully, so she's doing okay. My mom is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. I genuinely don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she'd feel guilty having her arrested over this, but my sisters and I want to convince her to, and I'd at least want documentation in case something happens in the future. User The Mockingbird said, not wanting to press charges is fine, but she should still report it so it's on file. Things could escalate, even with the no contact. Under this comment, user Apprehensive Hippos said 100% agreed. Also, OP, if there are no consequences this time, it makes it just that much easier for her to do something in the future. I don't care if the offender is related to me. A violent physical attack like that would see me end the relationship. Is Jen's resistance to reporting this assault based on what she feels are OP's desires related to ongoing relationships in his family? If so, that's fucked up, and OP needs to step up and be the partner she needs. Her safety and happiness should be coming before anything or anyone else. And OP's father trying to make excuses for the violent assault is just shameful. Sometimes if there are shitty people in your family, you have to make hard decisions. OP has some decisions to make. User Lady Pundit said, "Why does your mom get to assault someone and not pay the consequence? Your fiancé is enabling your mother's behavior. If you witness the assault, can't you press charges? Your brother doesn't even want to go to your wedding. Can't your mom get that through her thick skull?" Under this comment, OP said the following, "I believe I can, but my fear is 1, upsetting Jen for going against her wishes, even if for her own good. And 2, the police not taking it seriously because the one affected isn't even interested in pursuing anything. I'm likely going to just have it documented because unfortunately, my mom is the type of person to get significantly worse before she gets slightly better." User Cadence Quandary said, "Get security cameras and a Ring doorbell put in ASAP. Also, please take photos of any injuries and make sure your mother's texts and emails get archived and backed up. Time to create a binder and record every shitty incident just in case this escalates. I agree with speaking to the police about filing a report, because you are almost guaranteed that she is going to escalate and get worse. I would also recommend some hotel-style door locks that flip down from above to secure all exterior doors." Not long after, we got another update titled, "Some background on my relationship with my parents." Some people were asking questions about my mom and my decision not to be open with Jen about my relationship with my parents. I figure I could give some background on why we're so strained. Like some of you said, Mark was the golden child. Mark was my mom's baby boy, and she didn't do much to try and hide it. They didn't spend much time with my sisters and me like normal parents did with their kids, unless they had to. But they'd spend time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him out shopping while we stayed with a sitter, or bringing him home his favorite food and toys from the store when they'd shop alone. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new expensive clothes, while ours were thrifted, or new toys just for him compared to old toys we had to share with each other. If my sisters and I got gifts, they were for us to share, but my mom made it pretty clear that Mark's things were only for him and we shouldn't touch them. When Mark would screw up, I'd get punished for not being a good role model and showing him the proper way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys, and I got the beating because obviously he learned that behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push a kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and told to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother right. When I turned 13, I pushed for my parents to start giving me an allowance. They agreed as long as I did household chores like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was usually somewhere around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw that I was getting money and he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work, $10 of my allowance money was given to him each week because we were doing such a good job with our chores that he never touched. Whenever I asked him to help, he'd tell me it's not his job to do chores, so why should he bother? It was around this time that I started really distancing myself from my brother. By the time I entered high school, we only talked to each other when we needed small favors or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I wanted to finally get my own car and make money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My oldest sister Maggie helped me start my own bank account and showed me how to properly budget and save my money. I got my first car at 18 after all of my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and for extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly, I agreed, and for a while the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it and helped to maintain it pretty well. When he expressed wanting my parents to buy him his own car, my mom came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We got in a fight that night, which ended with her giving Mark my car and taking me to transfer ownership of it to him within the following few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else I could go at the time, I just sucked it up and signed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit in a long ceremony just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him alone for the night. So I only had the support of my sisters and my aunt and uncle who wanted to take me out. They ended up having to bring me home at my parents' request because they made me dinner to make it up to me. It was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mom put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish and I'm allergic to shellfish. My first year out of high school, I worked at 2 jobs to buy myself another car, and at the start of the new school year, I moved away for college and cut contact with them. They, mostly my mom, tried to reach out for the first few months via social media and Sophie, but I never responded, and I told Sophie she would be cut off too if she kept trying. When she couldn't get to me through Sophie, she tried going through my older sister Charlotte, and a few times through Maggie and Mark until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was a bluff because I had no idea how to do it, but it managed to scare her off, and the most I got from her was happy holiday texts over the years. Around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me they had been seeing a family therapist at Charlotte's request, and my parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant, but I agreed as long as they would be genuine, and the reconciliation process started when I moved back home. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything they put me through, and it took a lot for me to even begin to let them back into my life. When I met Jen, I wasn't sure where my relationship with her was going or where my relationship with my parents was going. I didn't want to mention my family at all, mostly because I was ready to cut contact again if I needed to. Jen was understanding of it being a sore subject and didn't press for more. I hope this helps shed some light on some of the questions I'd been seeing pop up. About 2 weeks later, we got OP's final update. I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to give me advice on what to do going forward and all the kind messages and comments I've gotten over the past few days/weeks. Jen and I have read the comments together and everything is appreciated. To answer the most common question about why I chose to reconnect after everything, the short answer is because I would do anything for my sisters. Charlotte wanted the entire family around for the birth of her first child and to help her while she adjusts. She didn't want part-time aunts and uncles who would only visit her kid during birthdays and holidays. She was never the type to ask for much of anything growing up, so when she asked if I would be willing to try for her, I agreed because it would make her happy. I also think part of me hoped that maybe they'd changed. I don't regret trying to reconcile either. My parents are still terrible, but I met the love of my life, so I call it a win. A few people wanted to know if there's an update, so here we go. Sorry if it's a mess or confusing, a lot has happened. We filed a report with the police and were told that even though Jen doesn't want to pursue anything, it's not up to us to decide whether it goes further, but they would keep our preference in mind. We provided some pretty decent evidence of the assault, including pictures of Jen's face and texts with my mom and dad talking about what happened. We were advised to report and record any other incidents with my mom going forward in case anything else happens. Considering where we live, I doubt it'll go anywhere, but at least we have it on record. I got about 100 angry text messages that tell me they at least spoke with her regarding the incident. My mom tried to corner me leaving my job and screamed at me about trying to ruin her life. She kept screaming that I was an awful son for trying to get her arrested over a small misunderstanding, and she didn't understand what she'd done to deserve being punished like this. I told her that if she didn't like being in legal trouble, then she shouldn't have hit Jen. She demanded I tell the police to forget the report, which I refused. I told her exactly what the officer said about it being out of my hands. She had a tantrum in the parking lot and hit me a few times before security intervened and dragged her off the property. I had to talk to my boss about the incident. Luckily, she was understanding of everything going on after I explained what was happening. When I got home, I told Jen what happened. She was upset and asked that we discuss the plan with my family moving forward. It was a long talk, but we took the advice of some Redditors and decided to go completely no contact with my family aside from my sisters. We agreed that having them in my life is adding unnecessary stress for both of us, and we aren't even married yet. She told me she wanted to consider moving away and putting some distance between us and my family. She said that she tried to stay out of my family issues because it's not her place, but she refuses to put up with my mom and her behavior or my dad enabling her abuse. A lot more was said, too much to put in this post, but I agreed with her that they were more trouble than they're worth, and I also don't want to put up with this anymore. I also agreed to go to therapy, and she's helping me find a therapist. I decided to call my dad after our talk and let him know I would be going no contact. He didn't answer the first time I called, so I left a message asking to have a long talk. When he called back, he asked if it was okay for my mom to be a part of the conversation. I told him it was okay since she needed to hear what I had to say too. The conversation went about as well as you could expect. I told them both that Jen and I are cutting them out of our lives. My dad demanded to know why I would do something like that after going through all the trouble of repairing our relationship. I told him that this entire thing with Mark has shown me that nothing is actually repaired between us, and as far as they're concerned, the world revolves only around my mom and my little brother. I told them that their continued favoritism of Mark has brought our relationship to a point of no return and that I wasn't interested in holding on to a failing relationship. I told them that I agreed to reconcile for Charlotte's sake, but I don't appreciate all of the disrespect towards me and Jen, and that I wouldn't put up with it anymore for both of our sakes. To my mom specifically, I told her that I was tired of her using me as a scapegoat for her bad parenting and Mark's attitude. I also told her that I would never forgive her for what she did to Jen and what she did to me and my sisters growing up. She started to say how I should move on like my sisters have, but I cut her off and told her that she should take their forgiveness and move on because she would never receive it from me, especially after everything she's done these last few weeks. She started crying and asking me how I could treat her like such a villain. I told her she could only be upset with herself because I've done nothing wrong. She cried harder and told me how much she regretted having me and how I've only tried to ruin her life. This started a heated argument between her and Jen once again, and Jen told her in much more colorful words that she was disgusting for saying something like that to me. I don't know if she left the room or just decided to shut up, but my mom stopped talking when Jen was done speaking to her. My dad said he wasn't okay with being shut out of my life, and he asked me to try to understand my mom's point of view. He said that she was also struggling because her kids were at odds and I was being unfair to punish her for her struggles with raising and caring for us. The last thing he said was that we were a family and I shouldn't let past mistakes stop us from moving forward together. I told him that the only person she ever cared for was Mark and herself, and there was nothing he could say or do to make me change my mind. I told him that it was up to him whether to keep my number, but I would be blocking him and my mom everywhere and I wouldn't be reaching out again. Then I hung up. Afterward, I sent a long email with the link to my posts attached to my entire family, uninviting everyone except my aunt and uncle and my sisters to the wedding. I hadn't cried in a long time, but Jen held me while I cried after writing the email and she assured me we would be okay. My sisters also reached out to me after reading the email. I apologized to Charlotte for not being able to continue reconciling like she wanted, but she told me it was okay and it's not my fault I had to cut them off again. The response from my family has been pretty mixed. Some are angry I aired out family issues on a public internet forum, while others are pissed at my parents because they never knew it was this bad. The last person I talked to about everything was Mark. He asked if I was cutting him off too, and I told him I wasn't, but I wouldn't be going out of my way to reach out to him either. He didn't argue and just wished me the best with the wedding, and we haven't spoken since. Right now, Jen and I are looking for a new place to stay. The plan is to move closer to Jen's brother. He lives about 3 hours from where we are now, and Jen and I like the city he's in. I spoke to my boss about transferring, and Jen is looking into the option of working 100% remotely or possibly finding a new job. And once again, our venue's changed. Since the guest list is significantly smaller, my FBIL is considering letting us use his lake house for our wedding. I don't plan to post any more about this unless the sky falls, at least not until the wedding, because I want to move on with life. But I'll try to answer any questions some of you might have. Thanks and happy holidays. Edit. It took a few days to post this and I had to keep removing details before I could actually post it. If anything's unclear, I'll answer as many questions as I can. User Gypsy1963 said, "You and Jen were obviously left with no choice. There was no other option but to cut ties because your mother was escalating in her unwillingness to even try to understand how much damage she's done to her family and the violence she reacted with because you wouldn't let her have her way and demands. Your father is not as bad, but his insistence on continuing to enable and excuse your mother and act like this will all blow over if you'll just accept the status quo is still insane and extremely difficult for anyone else to wrap their minds around. It's well past time for you and Jen to start your lives fresh, away from your parents, but please don't let your guard down. Make sure that you purchase and install a good security system in your new place, like a Ring doorbell or Simply Safe security system, so you can monitor visitors and gatekeep who you answer the door for and allow entry. I really hope that your sisters, especially Charlotte, remain safe, but I'm truly concerned for her and her baby. They're just too vulnerable with your mother resorting to violence. I hope as well that you have a wonderful and loving wedding wherever you decide, and that the family you do invite choose to attend and keep your parents from the when and where information. Definitely hire some kind of security to keep your special day peaceful, joyous, and lovely. My very best wishes and many, many blessings for yours and Jen's future. Keep protecting your sanity and privacy. Take care. Under this comment, OP said, I'm already anticipating the aftermath of moving. She's going to follow us when we move because that's the kind of crazy she is. When she doesn't get her way, she becomes obsessive until she's forced to stop. I spoke with a lawyer friend of mine to see about a possible restraining order to stop her before she starts. Thanks for the well wishes. Happy holidays. User to tell or not to tell said it was the right decision, and I think you should feel proud of yourself. You tried really hard for Charlotte and other reasons, and you did it with an open mind and heart, but I don't think you have any other choice seeing that the dynamics have not changed and, if anything, have gotten worse. Your physical, mental, and emotional health were all at risk had the relationships continued. Good luck with the next steps, and please keep us updated if you wish, including with the good stuff too. Wishing you and Jen all the best with the move, wedding, and beyond. User I Love Narcoa said, on the bright side, there won't be any possible favoritism between the grandchildren. Imagine Mark having kids. They would probably treat his kids better than the rest of their future grandkids. I'm kind of upset you didn't get the money back for the car they stole though. If they really wanted to reconcile, they would have paid you, but they didn't.